From the phone in your hand, to the car you drive, to the coffee you drink each morning, many of the titans of industry that produce these goods, companies like Ford and countless others, all share something fundamental in common. It isn't a product, or a market, or a particular business strategy. It's a home, a legal birthplace shared by an astonishing 68% of all Fortune 500 companies. More than 2 million separate business entities all have their legal roots planted in the same unlikely soil. And that place is Delaware. It's a state so small you could fit it into Los Angeles County twice. A state with more registered businesses than actual people. On the surface, it makes no sense. Why would the largest and most powerful corporations on Earth, scattered from California to New York, all pledge their legal allegiance to the second smallest state in the Union? The answer isn't just about taxes, though the savings are measured in the billions. The real story is far more dramatic. What if I told you that the system that allows this was born out of a bitter war between two neighboring states? A war that one state won by radically changing its laws to attract the wealthiest corporations in America. This is the story of how a tiny state won the war for corporate America, and how that victory over a century ago continues to shape our world, our economy, and our laws today. To understand how Delaware became the giant it is today, we have to travel back to the late 19th century. This was America's Gilded Age, an era of explosive industrial growth. Railroads were stitching the continent together. Steel mills were firing day and night, and vast fortunes were being built by men whose names are now etched into American history. Rockefeller, Carnegie, Morgan. This was the dawn of the modern corporation, a new type of commercial entity capable of operating on a scale never before imagined. But every corporation, then as now, needs a legal birthplace. It needs a state to grant it a charter, a certificate of incorporation that gives it the right to exist. Think of it like a passport. A company can operate anywhere, but its citizenship belongs to the state where it's incorporated. And in the 1890s and early 1900s, one state reigned supreme as the undisputed king of incorporation. That state was not Delaware. It was New Jersey, in an era defined by the rise of colossal monopolies, or trusts. New Jersey saw a golden opportunity. While other states were wary of the immense power these new corporate giants were accumulating, New Jersey rolled out the welcome mat. It aggressively liberalized its corporate laws, earning it the nickname the Mother of Trusts. New Jersey's laws were a dream for the ambitious industrialist. They made it incredibly easy for companies to merge, consolidate their power, and form complex holding companies that could own and control dozens of other businesses across state lines. Few restrictions were placed, and even fewer questions were asked. If you wanted to build a corporate empire, you went to New Jersey. And they did. John D. Rockefeller's legendary Standard Oil began in Ohio, but later reorganized with Standard Oil of New Jersey as its main holding company, which at its peak controlled over 90% of America's oil refining capacity. U.S. Steel, the first billion-dollar corporation in the world, was born in New Jersey in 1901. The state became the legal home for hundreds of the nation's largest and most powerful enterprises. This wasn't an accident. It was a business model. For every charter it granted, New Jersey collected lucrative franchise fees and taxes. It was, in effect, a race to the top, a competition to offer corporations the most power and flexibility in exchange for a steady stream of revenue. New Jersey was the master of this game. It was rich, powerful, and its position as the preferred home of corporate America seemed unassailable. But a storm was gathering on the horizon. One that would not only topple the king, but change the rules of the game forever. And the force that would unleash this storm was not a rival state, but a man, an unlikely crusader who saw New Jersey's corporate paradise as a profound moral failure. Now, let's turn our attention to Delaware. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, Delaware was New Jersey's polar opposite. It was a small, quiet, largely agricultural state, overshadowed by its industrious neighbors like Pennsylvania and Maryland. It had a modest economy, few natural resources to speak of, and a state budget that was a tiny fraction of New Jersey's. In the world of corporate charters, it was a non-entity. But while Delaware was quietly tending its farms, the political climate across America was undergoing a seismic shift. The Gilded Age had given way to the Progressive Era. Decades of unchecked corporate consolidation had led to a fierce public backlash. Journalists, known as muckrakers, exposed the brutal practices of the trusts, while politicians railed against the corrupting influence of big money on democracy. The public was angry, and they demanded reform. This wave of progressive anger found its champion in the most unexpected of places, the governor's mansion in New Jersey. His name was Woodrow Wilson. Before he was the 28th president, Woodrow Wilson was the governor of New Jersey, elected in 1910. Though put in office by the state's political machine, Wilson, a former president of Princeton University, was a staunch progressive at heart. He looked at the very laws that had made his state fabulously wealthy, the lax, permissive corporate codes, and saw a sickness. He declared that the trusts have slipped out of control of the very law that gave them leave to be. He saw New Jersey's status as the mother of trusts, not as a badge of honor, but as a mark of shame. And so, Wilson launched a crusade. He broke with the political bosses who had backed him and declared war on the corporate system that had enriched them. He championed a series of aggressive antitrust reforms known as the Seven Sisters Acts. These laws were a direct assault on the New Jersey model, designed to make it much harder for companies to merge, hold stock in other corporations, and engage in the anti-competitive practices that allowed monopolies to flourish. Wilson raised corporate taxes and gave state regulators new powers to scrutinize business activities. For the corporate giants, nestled comfortably in New Jersey, it was a declaration of war. The state that had once been their greatest ally was now their greatest adversary. By trying to clean up its act, New Jersey had just committed an act of economic self-sabotage. The corporate executives were apoplectic. Their legal haven was no more. They began to look for an escape route, a new home that would welcome them with the same open arms New Jersey once had. And just across the river, the small, quiet, agricultural state of Delaware was watching. And it saw the opportunity of a lifetime. What followed was one of the most brilliant and audacious strategic pivots in American legal and economic history. It was a true David versus Goliath story. On one side, you had New Jersey, the established corporate powerhouse, now mired in a moral crusade against its own source of wealth. On the other, you had Delaware, the underdog, with almost nothing to lose and everything to gain. While Governor Wilson was busy adding layers of regulation in New Jersey, a group of savvy lawyers and politicians in Delaware did the exact opposite. They recognized that the corporations fleeing New Jersey weren't just looking for lower taxes. They were looking for certainty, flexibility, and a legal system that spoke their language. Delaware decided it would give them all of that and more. This wasn't a half measure. It was a complete re-engineering of the state's legal DNA. The first and most crucial step was the General Corporation Law of 1899. A group of Delaware lawyers essentially took New Jersey's old, successful, and permissive corporate law, copied it, and then streamlined it. The new Delaware General Corporation Law, or GCL, was a masterpiece of corporate convenience. It made incorporating a business incredibly simple and fast. It granted corporations perpetual existence and gave them breathtakingly broad powers to engage in any legal business activity they desired. It placed minimal restrictions on mergers, acquisitions, and the complex capital structures that sophisticated companies required. The entire law was written not to restrict, but to enable. It was designed to be predictable, flexible, and above all, favorable to corporate management. But a flexible law wasn't enough. Delaware needed a trump card, something so valuable that no other state could match it. And they found it. This was Delaware's secret weapon, the Court of Chancery. In most states, business disputes were, and still are, handled in the same courts as every other civil case, often in front of a jury of laypeople who may have little understanding of complex corporate matters. Delaware's Court of Chancery is a specialized business court. There are no juries. Instead, cases are heard by judges, known as chancellors, who are nationally recognized experts in corporate law. For the directors of a major corporation, this was revolutionary. It removed the single biggest variable in litigation, the unpredictability of a jury. It meant that if your company was sued, your case would be decided by a judge who understood the intricacies of your business, based on a vast and consistent body of legal precedent developed over decades. This created a legal environment of unparalleled speed and predictability. For corporate America, this wasn't just a minor perk. It was a game changer. Finally, Delaware sealed the deal with an attractive financial proposition. It made incorporating and maintaining that incorporation administratively simple and often cost-effective. All a company needed was a registered agent, basically a mailbox and a legal point of contact in the state. The corporate exodus was swift and decisive. As Woodrow Wilson tightened the screws in New Jersey, a flood of companies rushed across the river to Delaware's welcoming shores. They found a state that didn't just tolerate them, but actively courted them. New Jersey, realizing its catastrophic error, rolled back many of Wilson's reforms by around 1920. But it was too little, too late. The damage was done. The war was over. By the 1920s and 30s, Delaware had not just defeated New Jersey, it had achieved total dominance. It became the undisputed legal home for corporate America. The tiny underdog had become the new king. Delaware's initial victory was about law, not taxes. It won by creating a superior legal product, a combination of flexible statutes and an expert judiciary that offered corporations predictability and protection. But as the decades passed, this legal dominance became the foundation for a new kind of advantage, one that would transform Delaware from a corporate haven into a domestic tax haven. The mechanism that made this possible is famously known as the Delaware Loophole. To understand how it works, we need to talk about intangible assets. Think about a company like Nike. What is its most valuable asset? It's not their factories or their inventory. It's the swoosh. It's the brand itself. An idea that carries immense value but has no physical form. The same is true for the formula for Coca-Cola or the software code that runs your phone. These are intangible assets. Trademarks, patents, and copyrights. They are often the most valuable things a modern corporation owns. And they are at the heart of the Delaware Holding Company strategy. In simple terms, Delaware law generally does not levy corporate income tax on income earned from these intangible assets if they are held by a company whose activities in the state are limited to managing those investments. This seemingly obscure rule created a pathway for corporations to make billions in tax liabilities simply disappear. Let's break it down. Imagine you own a national chain of wildly popular pizzerias. Your secret sauce recipe is legendary. You operate in high-tax states like California and New York, where a large chunk of your profits goes to state taxes. Now, following the Delaware strategy, you set up a new separate company, Secret Sauce Holdings, Inc., and incorporate it in Delaware. This new company does nothing but own the legal rights to your secret sauce recipe. It's just a subsidiary, a piece of paper in a filing cabinet in Wilmington. Next, your pizzerias in California and New York sign a licensing agreement. From now on, they must pay Secret Sauce Holdings a hefty royalty fee for the privilege of using the recipe. Here's where the magic happens. For your pizzerias in high-tax states, that massive royalty payment is now a tax-deductible business expense. It dramatically reduces their stated profits, and therefore their state tax bills. Meanwhile, all that royalty money flows into the bank account of Secret Sauce Holdings. And because that company is a Delaware holding company whose only income is from an intangible asset, Delaware doesn't tax that income. You've legally shifted billions in profits from high-tax states to a tax-free environment in Delaware. This isn't theoretical. Investigative reports and litigation in the 2000s detailed how Walmart used similar strategies which were estimated to have saved the company several $100 million in state taxes over a number of years. A landmark 2012 investigation by the New York Times estimated that this single loophole had cost other states around $9.5 billion in lost tax revenue over the previous decade. Academic studies found that corporations using this strategy could reduce their overall state tax burdens by 15 to 24%. For other states, it was a massive drain on their budgets. But for Delaware, it was a bonanza. While it didn't tax the income of these holding companies, it collected over $1 billion every single year in franchise fees and other corporate filing revenues. This income became a cornerstone of the state's budget, at times accounting for over 20% of all state revenue. As you might imagine, the other 49 states didn't just sit back and watch as billions in taxable income vanished into Delaware's legal black hole. They saw what was happening and began to fight back. The most powerful weapon in their arsenal has been a policy called combined reporting. States that adopt this policy, which include major economies like California and New York, essentially refuse to play Delaware's shell game. A combined reporting law requires a multi-state corporation to file a consolidated tax return that includes the income of all its subsidiaries, no matter where they are incorporated. In our pizza analogy, California would say, "We don't care that your secret sauce recipe is technically owned by a company in Delaware. You are one single business, and we are going to tax your total profits as such." This effectively nullifies the loophole. Other states have taken a more direct approach, passing laws that simply forbid companies from deducting the royalty payments they make to their own out-of-state shell companies. So with these powerful countermeasures in place, the Delaware loophole should be a thing of the past, right? And Delaware's dominance should be waning? Wrong. In fact, Delaware is more dominant than ever. Today, about 68% of the Fortune 500 and approximately 81% of all new U.S. companies are incorporated in Delaware. Companies that go public are incorporated in Delaware. Why? Because the fight over the tax loophole, while important, misses the fundamental reason for Delaware's enduring power. Companies may have come for the tax tricks, but they stay for the legal system. The true source of Delaware's strength remains what it was a century ago: predictability. The Court of Chancery, with its expert judges and deep body of case law, is still the most respected and efficient business court in the world. For a multi-billion-dollar corporation, the legal certainty that Delaware offers is priceless. It's worth far more than any tax loophole. Secondly, Delaware law provides one of the most management-friendly environments for corporate directors and officers, offering them broad protection in their business decisions. For the people who actually run these massive companies, Delaware is simply the safest place to be in charge. And finally, there is the powerful force of network effects. Delaware's century of dominance has created a self-perpetuating ecosystem. All the top corporate lawyers are experts in Delaware law. Investment banks often expect startups to incorporate in Delaware before they will invest. At this point, choosing to incorporate anywhere else has become the strange, risky move that requires justification. The war for corporate charters was won so decisively that its outcome is now baked into the fabric of our economy. The story of Delaware's rise is more than just a quirky piece of American history. It's a masterclass in strategy and the profound power of legal code. It began with a small state that saw a giant stumble. While New Jersey had a crisis of conscience, Delaware had a moment of clarity. It chose to build, with deliberate precision, the most accommodating and predictable legal playground on the planet. It won the war, not with armies or weapons, but with statutes and courtrooms. First, it offered a legal haven, built on the bedrock of the Court of Chancery. Then, that legal haven became a tax haven, built on the clever architecture of the holding company strategy. The consequences of that victory are still with us every day. The system born from that corporate war allows massive, profitable corporations to legally shift billions of dollars, minimizing their tax obligations in ways that are all but impossible for small businesses or individual citizens. Delaware is proof that the most effective havens are not always built on secrecy and sand, but on something far more powerful: a foundation of shrewd laws, a century of precedent, and a complete victory in the war for corporate America. If you found this dive into corporate history fascinating and want to understand the hidden mechanics of our economy, consider subscribing and hitting the like button. We unpack stories like this every week that explain the world around you. Let us know in the comments which corporate mystery you'd like us to investigate next.